USDA logo. United States Department of Agriculture. Meet the expert, Anna Porto-Fett, PhD, and John Luchansky, PhD.
I'm Anna Porto-Fett. I'm a food technologist at USDA ARS in Winmore, Pennsylvania.
And I'm John Luchansky. I'm a lead scientist and research microbiologist at the Eastern Regional Research Center here in Winmore, Pennsylvania.
Describe the subject area of your research.
We work with food macrobiology, food science, meat science, food processing, and the molecular biology and the other related disciplines.
The focus of our work tends to be on recovery, characterization, and control of pathogens, both in and on foods.
Describe the main goal of your research.
The main goal of our science is develop and validate interventions to eliminate pathogenic bacteria in foods. We look for prevalence levels, types, and location of various in food pathogen various points of food processing to the foods.
So when a bacterium finds its way either in or on foods, three things can happen. The bacterium can increase in numbers or grow. The bacteria can sort of hang around until conditions become more favorable so they could survive in foods. Or from a consumer perspective, from a food safety perspective, they could actually die. And that's what we try to quantify.
Describe the unique equipment in your laboratory.
We have a big facility here in Winmore, Pennsylvania. We have a challenge lab where we have equipment like grinders, mixers, stuffers. We have stoves, ovens. So here we can do what industry does. For example, when you do make like a burger, we make the burger here, we cook, and by doing that we can measure, quantify the lethality of, for example, stacking beef. That's one example of what we have here.
Describe three key areas of your research.
So we can talk about three different things. We can talk about the microorganisms that we work with. We can talk about the technologies that we work with, and we can talk about the tools that we work with. So in terms of the microorganisms, it would be like Listeria monocytogenes, sugar toxin producing E. coli and Salmonella. Some of the interventions would be heat, high pressure, biological like phage, bacteriocins. We could talk about food grade ingredients, different organic acids, clean label ingredients, which are very popular now because people want minimally processed foods. But at the end of the day, the goal is to see if those bacteria are going to increase, stay the same, or decrease in numbers.
And by doing this kind of research, we are able to help make our food supply safe, eliminate foodborne pathogens, and also, validate process that industry, and especially in this case here, what we do is small and very small processor, validate their process to make sure the product that go out for consumers are safe.
What sets your research apart from others?
So I think one thing that really sets us apart in the work that we do is that we work with real pathogens. We don't work with indicator microorganisms, we don't work with surrogates, although we can work with those. But I think what sets us apart is we work directly with real pathogens. The other thing that sets us apart is real food processing equipment. So grinders, what else?
Ovens,
tenderizers. So it's pilot scale equipment, it's real pathogens, and I think the other thing that clearly sets us apart is real food. So for example, if we want to do hamburgers, we're not working with a little 3-gram ball of meat in a test tube, we're making quarter pounders and we're putting it on a grill.
The results of our research here go directly to be applicable for industry and consumers because, as John said, we work in a real world. So results translate direct to public health and help regulatory agents and consumers establish, guidelines. How long they should cook a burger, for how long they should bake prime rib. So these results is directly applicable for consumers.
Of course, our ability to do that kind of work is because we have a unique facility here, which hopefully we'll have time to show you around today. But also we're appreciative of the money that we get from Congress to do this work, and we've had good industry support. We've also had good support from regulators.
Our research have been used many years for do risk assessment, so people, risk assessors can develop guidelines to help keep our food supply safe.
I think that's, again, one of our strengths. Before we do a project, we'll sit down with an industry partner who'll come in with us. They'll make the product that they make in a real way here in our lab. Of course, we're going to put pathogens in that because we want to follow the fate of the pathogen during processing and storage. But we'll also work with regulators because there might be some guidance they're coming out with, there might be rules they're coming out with. We want to provide them with scientifically sound data upon which to base those regulations.
What are some of the results of your research?
The results of our research is really, make me feel good about, because it's good to know when you conduct a research here in this facility and then a couple years later is able to change or make a new guidance to make people, make sure people is healthy.
So for example, some manufacturer will come to us and they'll say, I was approached by FSIS about the safety of my process. And they'll say, I think my process is very safe. And we'll say, well, how do you know that? And they'll say, well, no one's ever gotten sick. Well, that's not the right answer. So we'll work with them to make their product here. We'll contaminate it purposefully. And we'll say, okay, now we'll run your process, for example, jerky. And we'll see what kind of reduction.
Then they come with the process, and then we do here using similar products, using their product, their formulation, their conditions, and we want to, we inoculate the product here, and we quantify how many log, they get reduction. We are able to save, not just make the product safe, guarantee that the product is safe, but also reduce the time and temperature, and able to get like $5 economy a day, just based on, on change on the product.
So maybe to expand upon that a little bit, a jerky manufacturer came in, they sat down with us, they said, what's your process? They said fast and hot. It was for like 3 hours at 165 degrees. So we ran that. We made jerky with them. We inoculated that jerky with salmonella, with listeria, and with sugar toxin producing E. coli. And we found out it delivered a 7-log reduction. Now they could go back to FSIS and say, our process is safe. We're delivering a 7-log reduction, and it still tastes great. They're business people, so they said, geez, what if instead of 3 hours or 3.5 hours, you cut that time down to 2 or 2.5 hours? We repeat the experiment again, we got a similar result. We got about a 7-log reduction, a huge win. Again, being in the business, they said, well, could you cut that down to 1.5 hours? So we repeated that. We did 1.5 hours, and they still got the 7-log reduction. As Anna was alluding to, that difference in 2 hours saved them $5,000 a day in energy costs. And more importantly, it kept them in business because they had real data. We got a publication out of it, and that's a feel-good.
What are some real-world implications of your research?
Again, one of the things that I think our research has helped in a real-world situation is helped policy making, and it's made some label changes, it's made food safer, and it's provided some information that filled data voids for both industry and regulators. One aspect of our research we haven't talked about is that for risk assessment purposes, before you know there's a problem, you have to have data to see whether or not it's for real. And going back a few years, one of the problems folks were having was with Listeria monocytogenes in ready-to-eat meats. The problem was they didn't know the true prevalence of Listeria in those products. So we partnered with FSIS and some folks in industry, some companies, and over the course of a couple of years, we looked at 33,000 packages of hot dogs to see what the true prevalence of Listeria monocytogenes was. And
so it turned out the prevalence of Listeria hot dogs was 1.6%. They come to us and say, hey, they want to conduct this survey to understand the prevalence, to know the prevalence of Listeria in ready-to-eat food. So we put a multidisciplinary team together with about 35 people, and we analyzed about 30,000 pieces of ready-to-eat food. We established that the prevalence of Listeria was about 1.1%. That means that 10 years of that regulations have been, through the process, industry and regulators, it was working, and the prevalence is 10 times less than used to be 10 years ago.
so in the early 2000s, there were a lot of, in the 1990s and the early 2000s, there were several recalls and some large outbreaks due to Listeria monocytogenes in ready-to-eat foods. And so, as we mentioned, we were asked to do a study to determine the true prevalence of monocytogenes in frankfurters, as it were. And after looking at 32,800 packages of hot dogs from among 13 different manufacturers over about a 2-year period, we established that prevalence at 1.6%. That doesn't seem like a big number, but when you have 20 billion hot dogs a year consumed, it becomes a rather large number. So That study was done in the early 2000s. FSIS put some regulations in place, industry changed some formulations, working together to lower that prevalence in ready-to-eat foods. And we were invited back in the 2010, 2011 to do another survey to see if those regulations, to see if those changes had any positive effect on the prevalence. So this time around we did about 27,000 packages of food, 13 different categories of food, and indeed the prevalence was much lower, 10 to 50-fold lower. So that's quite a win.
What are the next steps for your research?
So regarding next steps, I mean, everybody has to eat. Bacteria are going to keep multiplying and dividing. What we want to do is, your risk is never going to be zero, but we want to keep working on recovery, characterization, and control of bacteria in foods, particularly foods that might be higher risk, maybe some higher volume foods, and in particular we've done a lot of work with specialty ethnic foods because they're usually made by small to very small manufacturers that might not have the resources.
I think regard to the next steps, we continue doing these validate interventions to make sure the food safe supply is safe.
So I think coming full circle with what we do or we do well or we do differently, again, I think our strength has been the partnerships that we've developed with both the regulatory agencies, be it FDA or FSIS, and our industry partners, and there's been many, and we're very pleased with those. So partnering with FSIS, with industry, working with our ARS colleagues and our academic colleagues to be able to really gain insight on bacteria. After all, bacteria just simply want to divide and propagate the species. The fun that we have as microbiologists is figuring out how they do that and controlling that multiplication.
What are some additional findings of your research?
So I think we've alluded to the fact that one of the things that I think sets us apart from other laboratories is the fact that we work with real pathogens. So we work with Listeria monocytogenes, with Salmonella, with Shigatoxin producing E. coli. We can work with indicator microorganisms, we can work with surrogates, but typically we work with real pathogens. We have a BSL-2 lab here, but in this BSL-2 lab we have pilot scale food processing equipment. So we have cheese vats, we have meat tenderizers, we have smokehouses, we've got walk-in environmentally controlled chambers where we can make a variety of products. And so I think that sets us apart, as does our ability to work both with regulators and with industry. So when we do these experiments, we talk about the bugs, we talk about the technology, we talk about the products that we make.
We do a lot of products here, like for example, we work with ham, prime ribs, hot dogs, burgers, cheese, specialty ethnic meats. We have done scrapple, geta, keeper beef, and for example, right now we are doing a full experiment we make a lot of Genoa salami, and if you want to see, we can show you our chamber where we are fermenting and drying a lot of sausage.
The thing we want to point out though, that the salami is going to look great, and it does look great, but it's not to eat because, as I mentioned, or we mentioned, that salami, when we were making the batter, we added to it Salmonella and Shigatoxin producing E. coli and Listeria monocytogenes. And the goal there is to see the fate of those bacteria as it ferments, as it dries. And we control relative humidity, we control the pH, we control the temperature, we control the airflow. And the facility here, the lab that we have, allows us to do that in a very controlled way.
As an example of Genoa salami, we work with a company that share with us how you make the sausage, how the conditions you dry fermented sausage, and what you see today inside of the incubator is exactly how you'll be seeing in a company. It is using industry type of protocol.
And at the end of the day, this will provide a validated process. The data will be scientifically sound. We'll publish this in a peer-reviewed journal. So anybody can use that information, including this company and others who are making similar products. And it'll be a validation of the process and really sound information on the lethality of that process and the fate of bacteria should, on occasion, at relatively low frequency and at relatively low levels, a bacterium that's a pathogen might find its way in or on such a product. The other thing that Ann and I have had a great opportunity to do, besides working with a great team with Brad and Laura and Nellie, over the years, we've had many, many students that have come in here, and we feel great, really, really positive, high school students, college students, about helping that next generation of people find their way in life and for a career, and hopefully that's a career in agriculture.
We feel really good about training the next generation of food safety professionals.
And working for ARS in particular has afforded us that opportunity. It's given us direction, it's giving us resources to be able to carry out the kind of research that we feel has made impact, and along the way has had some very great opportunities for establishing some nice collaborations.
USDA is an equal opportunity provider and employer. To file a complaint of discrimination, write to USDA, Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights, Office of the Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights, 1400 Independence Avenue, Southwest. Stop 9410. Washington, D.C. 20250. Or call toll-free at 866-632-9992 for English, or 800-877-8339 for TDD, or 866-377-8642 for English Federal Relay, or 800-845-6136 for Spanish Federal Relay. Music by Dexter Britton. Available under Creative Commons license from www.dexterbritton.com.